Hello and welcome again to Artists Alive. We've been to Lincoln and Sacramento and Oroville and Gridley and Chico and of course to the Arts Center in Marysville and to classrooms in Marysville and Yuba City, but today we are in Strawberry Valley, California, just outside of Clipper Mills, where we have the pleasure of visiting sculptor Philip Scortino in his studio. Let me introduce Philip to you now. Philip? Philip, wake up. And welcome to Artists Alive.
Pleasure, David.
We're just delighted to be here in your studio again, and we're interrupting you as you are doing what?
Well, this is a raw bronze casting, very much like this is a raw bronze casting. This is how they come from the foundry. I'll submit a wax piece, and then they'll give me back a metal piece. And then really the work begins, probably the hardest part of the process of producing a bronze sculpture. I know any bronze producing artist will confirm the most difficult thing to do is prepare the piece for the ultimate sale or presentation. And it's called chasing, and it's cleaning up all the marks. You see, this was a part that was removed from the bottom of this sculpture. And the founder puts this back. It's TIG welded. I've done it myself. Mm-hmm. And then these need to be cleaned off, and all the imperfections need to be cleaned off. This is a really clean piece. It's rather deceptive to say that the work's so difficult, but here is a bronze casting that's more common, and it's just as rough as can be. It's a Madonna and Child, but let me show you a piece that is a little further along. Madonna and Child. This is done for a local gynecologist. They own this piece, but I initially made it in marble. So the marble piece is about twice as big. In fact, almost all of these bronze castings are mock-ups, maquettes of marble sculptures that were commissioned, and I have to figure out what I'm going to do. So I'll design the initial piece in wax or clay, terracotta, and then I'll submit it to my client, and they'll okay the piece, hopefully, for a marble piece.
Now you've lived and worked up here in this studio for 21 years.
Well, I've been up here for 21 years, but I haven't had the studio that long.
How long have you had the studio?
The studio's been here for about 18 years.
Well, pretty close.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, do you work basically on a commission basis? Tell us how you.
Right now, I guess I'm happy to say at least 8 commissions. But I'm not so happy to say that it's been easier for me to acquire work than it has been to deliver it. I'm only one person in this studio, and I could probably bring somebody else in, but I rather jealously guard what I'm doing. And it's not that I guard my processes. I'm just as willing as I can be to share whatever I know with any other artist. And in fact, I do spend quite a bit of time on the telephone, especially when I have had ads in telephone books. So many sculptors call me and are curious where to acquire materials, and I'm delighted to share that with them. What I guard is really the quality of the ultimate perfecting of my work. Needless to say, no artist is going to allow anybody else to design for them, but to be able to ultimately finish the piece and produce it, it's very important for me to make sure that it's done right. But I have been surprised on a couple of occasions how good other people can do. And probably ultimately I will bring a 1 or 2 or some more people in. The commissions tie me up with the kind of work that I'm been asked to do. I'm really anxious to get a repertoire together of limited edition bronzes, work of my own ideas, to have a quantity of work available that I could open up perhaps my own gallery, maybe in Sacramento or somewhere in the Bay Area. But right now I can't do any of that because I'm just trying to get this work out that I've committed to doing. I wanted to show you this piece.
Okay.
This is such a it's a very small design. I don't know how well the cameras will pick this up, but it is very abstracted female. Did a 360-degree turn, and her feet are pretty realistic. Her knees are, and then all of a sudden her torso just becomes utterly twisted, and then she shows herself in profile.
What medium is this?
This is terracotta.
Ah.
It's clay.
Is this she also?
No.
Similar figure.
Earlier we talked, and we were, as David and I were roaming around the studio, we discussed various sculptures that we were doing here, and it's always a problem to name a particular sculpture. And I suggested this name and that name, and David said, she's Eve. And I said, they're all Eve. And in fact, they really are. To me, I could call them Eve 1, Eve 2. This I have tentatively called prima donna. I think probably because she has a prideful stance.
This is a beeswax, or not beeswax, but a wax.
This is a microcrystalline wax. It's the wax that is used for the lost wax process. A mold is made from a piece like this. I'll set her down. A mold is made such as this. This is made of rubber.
Do you do this work here, or do you send this out?
No, this I do myself.
You do?
Yes,
All right.
this I've made myself. Probably I'd like to have somebody else do it. But again, I'm worried about the quality that I get. They usually are able to produce molds that will produce a few good castings, but usually they do it so fast I'm uncomfortable with the product, so I've just started making them myself. They produce a product like, again, this is what came from this.
Yes.
And the rubber mold will produce a wax copy. And then the wax copy is in turn immersed in a fireproof batter, a kind of plaster, and then hot metal is poured into that after the wax is melted out. Consequently, the lost wax process.
As we move around, I don't want to skip
the
clef here and advise our viewers that you were commissioned by the Sacramento Symphony to present an original work for Carter Nice when he moved on from the Sacramento Symphony.
Yes, yes.
I remember it's being presented. It was quite a lovely piece.
Well, thank you, thank you. We started talking about that earlier, and it's a G clef, and I started to say earlier but didn't complete it. The G clef, I must say that I rendered it absolutely flawlessly.
As I recall, the piece was about this big. Is that
that's
about right?
a little bit bigger than that on its pedestal, about that big. But I regret choosing the subject. The woman who commissioned me to do it, oh, I can't remember her name. Excuse me. Gave me the option of what I wanted to do, but they were paying me so little that I said, well, I want to do something really nice, but I don't want to make it too complicated. But it turned out the piece was very complicated anyway. An awful lot of technical stuff to do, in and out the side of the object.
Three-dimensional clef.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I could have made something very extremely original and something that was more exciting to me. But the G clef is really nice, but I must say it's not a full sculpture. It's more of a quasi-sculpture. I suppose we were reflecting back again. If I were to make a figure of you of the human form, which is the most classic sculpture of all, I would be copying a man or copying a woman. I would be changing it and interpreting the human form. And really, that's what I did with the G clef too. I took a G clef and I interpreted it my way. I think probably I'm so committed now to the human form, I'd wished I'd made a human figure instead of a G clef. I guess that's my regret.
What was appropriate under the circumstances?
That's true. Carter seemed to like it.
Before we move to these works in the middle, some of your pieces of marble are back here in the back. Can you tell us a little bit about how you acquire marble and a little bit about some of the differences here in these pieces that are here in your studio?
the earliest acquisition of marble that I made, I live in America. If I were an Italian, I probably would have been able to find it anywhere. But as an art student, I acquired the first piece of marble from a stone dealer. As I saw a student working at the Art Institute where I attended, I was reluctant to approach him because he seemed so intent in what he was doing. So I didn't ask where he got the marble. I didn't ask anybody. But I went to a stone dealer and I just bought a piece of marble. I took it back to my studio and I tried to work it, and I couldn't understand why I wasn't having any success. So I finally gave it up. Pieces kept crumbling out, even though the stone was hard, but I couldn't have any success, so I finally abandoned it. Later, I learned that I needed to choose my marble more carefully. That marble came from Georgia. It was a very coarse crystal, and what my problem was is the crystals kept dislodging because they were too big, and when they became removed, they'd become variegated. But this marble, coming from Italy, is a very fine crystal. When I acquired my first piece of successful stone, the logical place to look was a monument company. That's where if our audience will think for a moment, if they needed to acquire some marble, where have any of us ever seen marble? We've seen it in cemeteries, and where do cemeteries get it? They get it from monument companies. So I went to a monument company in San Francisco about 1968 or something like that, and there was an old Italian man there. He was such a kind gentleman. I talked to him on the phone. I said, "Do you have any marble?" And he said, "I might have some." And he said, "I might have some in my scrap heap out and back." So I rushed out there with my girlfriend, now my wife, and he appreciated my enthusiasm, and he gave me a piece, probably about this big, only it was a square piece. And so since then, I've acquired lots of pieces from monument companies. There are many pieces up in my driveway that we see here that are statues where the heads broke off, that were salvaged from Rucola Monuments in a fine monument company in Rockland. But I must say that Sutter Monument Company is also, give them a plug, a splendid place also, where I bought the stuff from Rucola. Sutter gave me a whole bunch. So, you know, marble's not very popular in cemeteries anymore because it's so delicate. Granite is the rock of ages. So the marble has very little value. It will actually dissolve in saliva because of the acid. It's an organic material. You can actually take a little particle and put it in your mouth and chew it, and it will dissolve. So it has very little value. So this is a former monument that was damaged and I acquired. This piece, however, was imported by a sculptor in Seattle, Washington, and I paid lots of money. This is $600 for this piece. I bought 4 pieces for a client, and this is one left, and I delivered the other 3 to him. But this is one that remains.
How about this dark one?
I'm very excited about this. Also, this is Belgium black marble. And I have very little experience with it, except that I think the next piece I make will probably be made out of either about 1/3 of this, because it has to be a long, narrow, vertical piece, or I might just preserve the integrity of this nice block and buy another piece. But it's Belgium black, and it's the finest black marble in the world, finest that we have. It's a very fine crystal structure. It'll take the greatest detail, but it's hard and it's brittle. When I say hard, I want the audience to understand that marble is not so hard that it's not an ideal stone for sculpture. Obviously, there's so much of it. It must have some. It doesn't just represent a challenge for the artist. Actually, it accommodates the artist's ideas if it's the right marble. Black marble, however, is much more difficult to work than white marble because it's brittle. It has a tendency to shatter. This one behaves like a wolf. It's wild and doesn't want to obey, but it will if you treat it just right. White marble is like...
an example of which is here.
Exactly. Yeah. This is white marble. This is a commission by Cynthia McKay, a woman who owns 2 of my sculptures in Sacramento. one of my favorite clients, really. These sculptures, I think, mean more to her than just to ornament her house.
Well, if this piece is the wolf, who's this?
This one behaves more like a tame German shepherd who just can't wait to obey every command as long as you know how to train it. So one will do what you want if you know how to extract it, but the other one just can't wait to do what you want. And marble is not hard like granite is hard or like the stones in your driveway are hard. It's a stone. I have the microphone pick that up, and it's hard, but it's not so hard that it can't be worked pretty easily. So Cynthia bought a piece of sculpture from me many years ago. She sent me a letter longer ago now than I wish was the case, because that was the inception of the commission, and told me that she wanted to interpret a concept that she had learned from some religious leader somewhere about that the ideal relationship between a man and a woman emerged from fire. That fire emanates the male and female figure. Hence, I could show you probably better in the bronze that we initially started out with, because this marble is yet very unfinished.
Well, let me get it while you're...
Well, I'll unlock this from the vise, and I can hold it up over here next to this piece.
Good.
This is a limited edition bronze. I had 3 casts, so I sold all 3. I'm real excited about it. Here we have one tongue of fire. You see the fire emanating here?
Oh, yes.
As if it's coming from velocity. And here's another tongue of fire, almost the same as the one on the opposite side. In the center coalesce or emerge a female figure with a negative tongue of fire. And on the other side emerges a male figure born from the fire. And then they begin to twirl and spiral around with the velocity of flame, because I like my work to have force and power and some thrust. I'm very uncomfortable with sculpture being a static, heavy form of expression. So I'd like them to have some movement. So here they join in the center, their arms start to become tongues of fire again, and they coalesce into a single tongue of fire. So her idea was that male and female are born from the male and female ultimate relationship are born from fire and then coalesce into one. It's called twin flames.
Let me put it back for you. You certainly captured her image here, didn't you? I mean, it's quite excellent.
Thank you, David. I spent a summer struggling with that. It actually spoiled my vacation. We had to go on vacation, and I wasn't yet to a point of where I was satisfied. We went on vacation, and I tried to make the best face I could while I was there. I was so anxious to get back. Shortly after, actually it was I think the last 4th, when I returned, that was warm, the wax is easy to move when it's warm, and I was able to get what I wanted. It was very gratifying.
What is the largest piece you've ever sculpted?
Well, the largest piece that I have put my name on is slightly bigger than myself. Mm-hmm. But as a student, I worked with a man who did a lot of architectural commissions, and there was a lot of latitude that the students had at the Dayton Art Institute, and I was very fortunate to work with a lot of talented students under Bob Kepnick, and we worked on a piece that was about this is going back more than 30 years. Probably was about 18 feet high. So I had the privilege of working on such a large piece. Made of aluminum, it was cast in multiple pieces welded together and then chased, like we discussed, the smaller bronzes pieces being chased.
Have you ever been to Daniel? I think his name is Daniel Chester French's studio in Massachusetts, Stockbridge, Massachusetts. He's the sculptor who did the Lincoln Memorial.
Oh.
Your setting here is so reminiscent of that studio to me.
Wow,
it's in the mountains outside of Stockbridge, and he has a building similar to this, but because of the scale of his work, the marble is brought in on railroad cars, so there are tracks coming into the studio. You'd love it.
I would love
just
that. Where is it?
It's outside of Stockbridge, Massachusetts, which is also known for Tanglewood is there, and is it's Norman Rockwell's town. So
All right,
it's a place you'd love.
We've enjoyed Norman Rockwell, especially as my children were growing up. I think both of my daughters are enthusiastic artists, and they have copied Norman Rockwell's work over and over and over again, because to learn from the masters is probably the most effective way.
Stockbridge needs to be on your itinerary.
I will remember that.
Come to the center here and tell us what what work is in progress.
Well, this is marble. Stephanie, our producer here, initially asked us, "What is this material?" And that is such a frequent comment especially when I'm doing any kind of public demonstration, which I'm very excited and happy to say. And I hope that you will all come and see me and come to the Prune Festival this year, because I'll be at the Prune Festival.
Oh, you'll be one of the demonstrating artists?
Yes.
Great.
I haven't been there for the last couple of years, but I was there for the first 2 or 3. So this is marble. And it kind of looks at this stage of development, because it reflects so much light, being that it's rough, looks kind of like chalk. But this is the beginning of the process of refining it into a polished state. The concept is a female, Haley, in fact.
This is a work commissioned.
Commissioned by Dr. John Rose and his wife Donna, and it's commemorating his daughter Haley, who was born during the time of Halley's Comet. And John Rose is a very considerate and old friend of mine. I talked to him on the telephone, and he had 2 requirements. And he said he wanted me to commemorate his daughter in my own inimitable way, which gave me all the latitude in the world. And he said, "Oh yes, it must have an H in it." And I noticed you noticed that right away when you looked at this earlier. I don't know if the camera will be able to see it. And this thing slides around.
Don't drop it.
Fall right on the floor. There's a little H right here for an earring. So this is what I showed to John and Donna. This is the planet Earth. This is Haley holding the Earth in her hand, and this is just an excuse for some ornamental design, which is her hair flowing around the Earth, more hair flowing up here, and this is not the sun, which I know it looks very much like the sun, but when one realizes what the subject is, it'll be okay. That this is the comet zooming in towards the Earth. So here I'm translating
terracotta.
This is terracotta unbaked, so it's very delicate, and here it's being translated into marble.
Work for us.
So I'm going to. This is one of the tails of the comet. This is a good sharp chisel.
I might note for our viewers that as we were setting up, you told me, and it surprised me, that you make your own chisels.
Yes, I'm very excited about that.
That's quite an undertaking.
Well, people would say, well, I remember at the California State Fair, they said, "Oh, I use some air chisels." They say Michelangelo didn't have air chisels. They were friendly enough. And they said, and they would say similar things. Do you make your own chisels? And I'd say, no, I buy them. And they say, Michelangelo didn't buy his chisels. Actually, he had his craftsmen make them.
I'm sure he did.
He had quite not a large workshop, I don't think, by Renaissance standards, but he certainly had a workshop. Right here where I'm working is about right here. You see, it's
Yes.
kind of like a secondary ray. It doesn't really penetrate out. So now I'm going to cut in back the other way. But making chisels really is not very hard to do. When I say I make them, what I've been doing recently are taking all the old chisels that I've dulled over the years. Typically, only the tip is tempered. Only about the first eighth of an inch is tempered. In other words, the steel is brought to a point and then frozen, almost like ice is frozen, and it becomes, you see I'm starting to make this groove like the rest of these grooves? And it becomes frozen and stays hard. The rest of the chisel is annealed, which means it's soft. I've always known it wouldn't be a problem just to heat the chisel piece of steel up and hammer it out to the shape I wanted. But over the years, as I've gone to a fast grinder to keep my chisels sharp, because they only stay sharp for about 5 minutes. And that if I get too quick, too busy, that I'd heat the tip of it up, and that would suddenly anneal the metal, which means it would bring the metal back to a state of kind of relaxation, and it would lose its hardness. When it loses its hardness, you cannot even hit the marble once without it mushrooming out. It just does. It's like hitting it with a piece of wood.
Do you think, have you ever heard this, that inside this piece of marble is this sculpture and you're simply freeing it? Have you ever heard that theory?
Oh, sure.
Is that true?
Well,
are you just letting
I guess it's destiny and fate.
Yeah.
It's destiny and fate. That would be perhaps a compliment. I would not allow myself that I would be so honored to take a piece of nature and liberate it. I would, if someone would say that of me or what I've done, I'd be greatly complimented. I know that some great sculptors have felt that way. Yeah. When I see typically, I think that saying very much comes from being inspired by looking at a stone and then letting that stone kind of develop its own personality lots of times. And I know also that there have been raw blocks where a figure has been extracted that doesn't have any resemblance to the stone. And it certainly would appeal to the imagination to think that one is liberating that. I always must be. I guess I'm a product of my century, and I probably think that I'm more. Hopefully, I'm not intruding on nature rather than liberating
you know
something.
what we're intruding on is the tyranny of the clock. We have
Honestly,
to go. Yes.
So quick.
Yes.
Oh
so
my
continue
goodness.
to work
All right.
as I thank you, Philip, again for inviting us to your
My
studio,
pleasure.
and as I thank our viewing audience for joining us again this evening on Artists Alive. Good night.